Hello and welcome back to the Intersect. I am your co-host, Emily, joined by the lovely Mary Bruno. And today we are welcoming a very good friend of ours, Christina Valenzuela. Christina is the owner of Pearl and Thistle, LLC, where she provides education and support programs to help Catholics share the language of the body in their families and their parishes. She has been a certified instructor in the Boston Crosscheck method of NFP since 2013, and her parent-daughter cycle and period education program, Cycle Prep, was a finalist project in the 2021 OSV Innovation Challenge. Christina is a wife of 12 years and a mother of 4 and a family karaoke all-star. So welcome, Christina. We're so excited to have you.
I am so excited to chat with you ladies today.
Yeah, this is going to be like one of the most, I hate to say like relaxed conversations, but we just know you so well. And we were like, we like to plan our podcasts, but like this one, we were just like, nah, we're just going into this one. We know what we want to talk about.
Go anywhere, just buckle up.
Exactly. So Christina, let's just kick this off. Like, first of all, we're huge fans of your work, especially, you kind of have two ends of the spectrum with the work that you do outside of your instructor side of things. So you are focusing on getting teen girls body literate with your cycle prep program, and then also looking at supporting couples in marriage through diocese, like as they continue to practice NFP over the course of their marriage. So your view, which I've always loved, of NFP and fertility awareness is like, this is lifelong, you start early, and then you have ongoing continuing support. So I'd love for you to just talk about kind of how you formulated that ethos, where you drew on that from, and what your inspirations were and how you used those inspirations to apply within your work.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question because you make it sound like I had some sort of plan that I put together. And really, it was mostly me going through my work. So it started with natural family planning and just the questions and the problems that couples would throw my way. So some of the issues were, I wish I would have learned this sooner. I needed to know this as a teen. Where was the education? And I was like, okay, yeah, this is related to the work that I do. And then other people said, our parishes really need to talk more about this because people may learn it and they need support. They need to switch a method. Like, where do we have ongoing stuff? And I was like, oh yeah, that's something that I can do. And so the common thread really is just, this concept that literacy, right? When we talk about body literacy, literacy is a lifelong skill. It's something that we learn gradually, and we apply that to literacy in other contexts, right? We're like teaching our kids how to read. It happens over a long course of time, and then it continues to develop as you grow. So, my whole impetus is really to look at this and to say, like, how can we promote literacy in a really robust way, beginning with the very early stages and then continuing as the language of our body changes throughout our married life, throughout the circumstances. So that's really the thread that ended up going through everything, but I kind of had to put the pieces together first. And then I was like, oh yeah, they do fit together. I just have to figure out how to articulate that.
Well, I had the pleasure of watching your cycle prep video. I don't remember which one it was, but I thought you did such a good job and made it so relatable for girls who are of a certain age. And of course, watching it, I thought back to myself at that age and how much I would have appreciated it and how it's something that so many of us, as mothers thinking about considering our daughters and us at that age, it's kind of like something a lot of people don't know that they want it. Like they don't know they need it until they're kind of exposed to it. So I'm just curious, a couple of things, like what motivated you to make it in that cute little way that you did? And what's been the response, like as you speak to mothers and daughters who have gone through your program?
So the design of Cycle Prep, so just to back up, so for anybody who hasn't seen it, Cycle Prep is this program. It's basically 4 videos, and I walk parents and daughters through the process of what is a menstrual cycle. So we go through anatomy, we go through 4 key hormones in the cycle. And I have this set up where I have this specific analogy of the kingdom. So I have these different characters that the hormones play, and I kind of tell it as a story. That motivation really came from this idea of body literacy. I was like, well, if we're learning to read our body, then we should learn how to tell the story of our menstrual cycle, right? Like, so I thought, well, how could I tell a story with this and make it relatable for girls? And then I just kind of drew inspiration from other places that have done, I think, a really good job of body positivity, not in the sense of just saying like, everything's good, do whatever you want, but like that our bodies themselves are good and they deserve respect in how we think and speak about them. So there's some work that I kind of learned a lot from on that. And then I tested it. I tested it with my daughters. I tested it with kids in the school community whose moms were also looking for this education, and kind of just refined things as I went along. So, so the creative process really came from that initial desire to just help girls tell a story. What would that look like? And then it kind of went from there.
And I love how specifically you're talking about that kingdom analogy. When I was watching it, I felt like 2 things were happening. I was learning about the science of it, but I was also learning about, you were also telling the story of creating this environment where we appreciate the gift that we're preparing for. I'm sure that was your intention, but I just thought you did such a good job of that there's both things happening at the same time.
Well, I thank you. I wish I could say that I have like a degree in education and it was totally planned. But really, I felt like I learned a lot through just trying to absorb the way that other people spoke about things, and then just to observe how girls reacted to it and how moms reacted to it. That was another big thing. That, I hear a lot of feedback from the moms. I don't have surveys that I send out to 8-year-old girls. So getting the feedback from the moms and hearing them say what a positive thing it was has really encouraged me to kind of keep that style going.
Yeah, and I've always loved the way like you're genuinely curious about not just what it is that you're trying to teach, but also the way that it's received. And you're so open to like adjusting based on like, okay, I have this idea. Now, what does it look like in practice? And I think that is so essential to fertility awareness education. It has to be practical. And, going back to what you were talking about with like lifelong literacy, I think that this is really the birth control mentality that we kind of like, we find ourselves butting up against, this idea that fertility is fixed. It is understandable, it's finite. And I think that really is one of the hardest mental shifts getting into fertility awareness, is that no, your fertility is changing every day and there will be patterns, but cycle to cycle is going to be a little different because it is responding in real time to your real life. And that's uncomfortable. And it's like, I just really want something to be predictable. And so, this kind of like segues into, one of the things that you've done a lot of research on is theology of the body, right? And in Catholic communities, we talk about this all the time. Like we love it because, this whole idea that our bodies hold this whole language of truth that we can discover is exciting. And it's like, tell me more. It's like, for years, for thousands of years, we kind of approached the human body out of fear and like, don't ask questions and don't dig into this. And now we have this whole door thrown open of no, the body was created by God and it's good. What is it trying to tell us? And so talking about that literacy and how that relates to theology of the body, like what have you learned through that?
Well, I mean, one of the things, it's interesting because when I was introduced to theology of the body, and a lot of theology of the body, fair enough, is rooted around sex, right? Like what is the meaning of the language of the body that male and female speak in the act of sex, right? But even as a senior in college, I actually wrote a senior thesis on theology of the body and kind of extending some of those principles to the corporal works of mercy. So I wrote a senior thesis about the theology of the body as a call to service and the language and the truth that our body speaks in serving other people. Because JP2 even at the end has this call for like, these principles apply outside of marriage and sex, right? We need to explore them more. And I was like, yes, that's a great idea. So it's interesting now I'm in the context of like fertility awareness and natural family planning, which like is related to sex. But at the same time, I'm really curious about this concept of original solitude in theology of the body. And I could just gush about it. But for people who aren't aware, original solitude is the original encounter that Adam has, right, before the creation of Eve, where God brings to him all the animals and he's trying to find a helper. And Adam names the animals and understands who they are. And in doing that, he comes to realize like how different he is from all the animals, and that this original solitude, like I am alone. Like I am a weird creature. I am distinct. I am separate. I am other. And I don't have an other like me, right? So what I've kind of come around to with this language of the body is thinking about, well, as women and our cycles and learning to read the language of our women's bodies, can we have an experience of original solitude? Like, is this an invitation now for women to look at the design of our bodies, to understand how different we are, to understand how other we are, and for that to be a foundational experience which helps us better understand the meaning of original unity, right? Because that's the thing, because then having that experience with Adam allows him to finally recognize Eve when she is created, right? He's like, ah, yes, at last. Like if he wouldn't have had that original solitude experience, would he have been as delighted? Would he have been as enthusiastic about Eve? We can't tell. But so I'm kind of toying with this idea that like our cycles and the language that they speak to us about God and about who we are is an opportunity for us to kind of have this original solitude, which is preparation for whatever else we encounter in our vocation in life.
What a beautiful way to think about our cycles. Because I know like when we chart our cycles, like it is so frustrating in so many ways for so many reasons. And I love, that having that approach. And again, this kind of goes back to like, this is so different from like the birth control mentality. And, we talked about this on a couple other episodes, that one of the things that fertility awareness does is it gives you so much access to self-knowledge, which can be so overwhelming. It's like, because it becomes this segue into so many other things. Like I got into like psychological therapy in part because of practicing fertility awareness, like that I just realized, like I started to understand my body, which led me to a deeper understanding of my mind and my emotions. And I was like, okay, I need some help. And that's, it's hard to have all this information and to know what to do with it, but to see it as like a positive. I know that it is so much easier to just have it controlled, but to view it as something to be understood and something that is a benefit and an asset. The fact that we are not men is good. And it's got a purpose. And it's like that it just totally flips the script of so many things that we hear. And I think, when you first hear that, it's hard to wrestle with because it's so contradictory to what we're used to. But that allowing ourselves to sit with that and wrestle does become this really beautifully positive thing.
Yeah, well, and I love that too, because the original solitude is something that was painful for Adam, right? It was something where he was like, I am uncomfortable. I'm not happy with how things are right now. It wasn't this like magical, like I'm alone prancing around the Garden of Eden with God. It was like, I'm alone and I want to have somebody with me. Like, even though I'm right here with God and like I'm fulfilled in so many ways, right? And I know that he's with me and he's given me this task. Like, I still want someone to share it with. Like, there's like a void, right? And so I think it's completely apt to say that like treating our cycles, yes, they're absolutely fundamentally good as part of our design as being women, but they also are places of encounter with trial and frustration and suffering. And sometimes that is the preparation we need to joyfully delight in whatever comes next.
Yes. I appreciate you putting it in those terms like so much. I've often thought something similar when considering the theology of the body, because those are words we hear a lot, especially as Catholics. And as I was learning more about it and this term, language of the body and how, but it's always talked in that framework of sex. It's really focused there. And as I learned fertility awareness and I began to understand it more as, oh, my body's communicating to me daily. Like, this is how God has designed me. He has designed my body to communicate a ton of information to me daily that I can choose to pay attention. I could choose not to. And then I can use that information to make various other decisions when it comes to health and when it comes to my marriage, and so many different things. And so it has been a bit frustrating for me when I was making that connection, that here the theology of the body illuminates this language of the body. So why is our fertility so often left out of that conversation? Like, I've wrestled with that personally. How can we, and you're doing such a good job of that, how can we bring this more naturally into this holistic view of theology of the body?
Well, and this is something too where it's hard kind of putting your foot down and saying, like, this is the space that I'm going to occupy, because people have their own opinions. You ladies know this. Everybody has their own opinions about what you should be doing and how you should be talking. So for my cycle prep programs and for my charting for girls, so I have these programs to teach body literacy to young girls. And I actually don't teach them about fertility. I don't talk about sex. And I've had a few people say that they're really disappointed that I don't do that, because it's such an integral part of understanding, like, the purpose of the cycle and the design of our bodies. And to that I say absolutely yes. But like, my role is to try and push conversations, to challenge the notion that every single conversation we have to have about our cycles has to be at the service of reproduction and fertility. But like, I just want to create a space where we can feel safe as women talking about the value of our bodies for themselves, for myself, and the health and the mental well-being and what it does for me as a person. Because otherwise, I think what we're missing out on is an opportunity to have meaningful conversations with women who struggle with infertility, or women who completely opt out of having families because they are in consecrated religious life. Like, their bodies have value and meaning, right, in their cycles. And it's
Or
not
because they have a serious medical reason to avoid pregnancy as well.
exactly. So like the biological motherhood doesn't have to be the telos of every conversation that we have about our physical cycles. And so that's kind of where I'm just landing with my work. And I know that for some people that's not comfortable, and that's fine. I don't feel like I need to be everybody's cup of tea. That's totally okay. But for people who do want to have those conversations, I'm really trying to just create space for that.
And I just want to clarify too, when I speak fertility, I'm not narrowing that specifically to like trying to have a baby. I think that, naturally the average person hears that, they think, well, when you're talking about fertility, you're talking about open, pregnancy, I guess, or some variation of that. But no, when I say fertility, this is intimately connected to our health, right? And so that is a vehicle for us to learn about how we are designed. So that's what I mean when I say the word fertility, and that being left out of that conversation, the theology of the body.
Oh, I love that.
And it is so important to open that up, because yes, ovulation is geared towards making a baby. That's the purpose. But also, as we know, like, the whole symphony of hormones around ovulation are both a cause of and effect of our overall health. And so I love that you're just like, hey, ladies, guess what? You have intrinsic worth and dignity purely because you exist, not because of what your body can do. And if you need healing and you need to be understood, that is in and of itself a worthy pursuit. And I love that you're creating space for that, because as Mary and I both know, one of the issues with a lot of Catholic conversations is that we really do have this limited idea of what does it mean to be a mother? What does it mean to procreate? What does it mean to be fruitful? We have such a limited understanding of this. And one of the conversations that Mary and I have been involved in is just, broadening this idea of fruitfulness and generosity to include children, absolutely. But it's so much bigger than that, and this is, I think, kind of the purpose of theology of the body, is that just the fact that you have a married couple, there is fruitfulness, whether or not there are ever children. Like, that is just intrinsic to the state of marriage, like, if you allow it to unfold as it's supposed to. And like you said, that's a very uncomfortable conversation for a lot of people, because it is very comfortable for fruitfulness and procreation and, family life to be very black and white. Like, you get married, you make babies, boom, done. And it's like, it's nuanced. It's so much more nuanced. So I love that you're trying to create that space to talk about fertility in a way that is just about your health and your basic goodness for being alive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I also too want to just piggyback onto that lovely series of sentences you just shared, Emily, because that approach too is so important. I think a lot of people that's been absent. Okay, we've established that, and it's so meaningful, especially as you brought up, Christina, a little while, infertility. And I'm using that specifically as an example because I am infertile, and I've experienced the discomfort about this conversation around biological children, but it's your approach that's really tackling that head on, so that so what I'm explaining is that had I been introduced to it like you are trying to explain it to people, it still would be very painful. Okay, I'm not trying to say it wouldn't be, but my understanding of that and how I relate to the world, how I understand my worth would have been a lot different. And it took me years to figure that out. So whether you're fertile or infertile, this is a very important conversation to understand. And when you're even if you're fertile, we're still called to be, the spiritual motherhood and the other aspects of that. But also something I was just thinking about yesterday is that, to our own children that we are directly mothers to in our home, if we're not serving and loving them well as spiritual mothers, then they're not gonna be able to, it's going to be harder for them to be fruitful as well. So our ability to love them well fills them up and trains them in a way that they can also go and produce fruit into the world. So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I just thought that was so cool to think of. Our ability to love our children well sets them up for that. And then that just keeps on giving.
Yeah. Well, and then one of the things too, I mean, I don't want to harp on cycle prep if we want to go a different direction, but that reminds me of, so one of the things that's a little bit different, I think, about cycle prep is that at the end, I teach the girls, I commission them to create a culture of care for everyone around them. So I basically say, now that we have this information, we're kind of responsible for knowing what to do with it. And so, you may observe the first place it starts is with your body and what's going on with you. And you need to care for your body when it tells you that it needs something. And then I say, and then we can extend this care to other people. So kind of what it sounded like you were talking about, Mary, is this concept that if we take time to be fruitful and to notice the ways that grace is building in our lives, right? And we extend that to other people, they'll be equipped to give that grace and that fruitfulness to other people. I mean, I think keeping these conversations going and just always bringing it home to yes, we need to learn about this for ourselves, but ultimately everything that we do for ourselves is really so that we can serve, so that we can be fruitful, so that we can reach out to others. And they can also be themselves and be fruitful and reach out to others. So the communal aspect. And I think, again, if tying it back into theology of the body, that's exactly what it's all about, right? Is that we all give and we receive love, and we give and we receive love. And that's just what it means to be human, right?
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue. I just got joined by my son. So if you hear babbling in the background, that's what's going on. Anyway, so one of the other things that you focused on, this is such a good segue, is your NFP ambassador program. And I know when you were first formulating that, what was it, 2-3 years ago? I don't even remember. You actually reached out to me and showed me the program. And I was so impressed because what you did is you really recognized the need for that ongoing support and the ways in which couples need that support. And also for Catholics, we have this principle of subsidiarity, is that you address a problem at its most local level. And so your idea of training ambassadors in parishes who can minister to couples is so perfect about, just building that community and building those spaces where we can talk about the struggles. We can talk about the fact that like Marquette is the best method for me, but I can't afford it. We can talk about, I have serious need to avoid, but it's making me feel like I'm choosing between my spouse and my faith. Like let's really like create a space where we can have those conversations. So if you can talk about, just kind of a little bit about that program, and then as you've been implementing it, what you've kind of discovered.
Yeah, so I mean, it's still kind of in its infancy stages. I've trained, at this point, I think I've trained about 45 or 50 ambassadors through various training programs. And the thing about the ambassador training program is that it's actually a discernment program. So it has a component where you learn, like, here are different types of NFP, here are the costs associated with them, here are a bunch of resources, here are just some basic skills to help you practice talking about NFP in your parish. But really the program is about asking the question, like, what is God calling you specifically to do in your parish based on your personal experiences, right? Your personal struggles, your personal triumphs, your joys, your gifts. And so I basically take people who have a desire to support NFP, whether they're already instructors or they're just users and have seen this need in the parish, and really try to get them to discern, what could God be calling me to do? Because I think we have in our mindset that like every parish needs to have a regular NFP info session, right? Like, I don't think that that's the case, or that every parish needs to have this particular type of support group. And I'm like, well, no, every parish is unique. Every parish is its own instance of the body of Christ. And you are a moving part of that body that is here trying to figure out how you can better serve your unique parish. So what I've learned is that it's really, really hard to do via Zoom. I've done this program. When I do it on Zoom, it's like 90-minute sessions for 4 weeks. And it's hard. You want to have these nitty-gritty conversations with folks and really dive into things, and on Zoom, it's not great. So I was able to do it live in person as a retreat day in the Diocese of Venice in October. And that was incredibly fruitful, to be able to just sit and to physically be in a space with somebody, to call down the Holy Spirit, to pray together, to discern together, to shed tears together. It was really, really healing for people who were there, and the people in attendance formed their own little community. And now they're all equipped to go out and to do whatever God has called them to do in their unique parish. So they have very different ministries that they're doing, but they're all serving, and they're all ambassadors, and they're just doing their thing. So if anything, I've learned in that particular program that I really need to be face to face with folks, and that's hard to do these days. But that's kind of the next thing that's in the works for me, is trying to figure out how to make that program a little more mobile, and see what we can do with that. So
I didn't realize that's how it was. I think that is beautiful how you described it as a discernment process or program, because as you began to explain it, the words of the body of Christ popped up in my head. And then that's what you said out loud. You're absolutely right. And we have to use all of our gifts. We're unique. And that's the beauty of the body of Christ. He has designed us uniquely on purpose. That's why every family is not called to have 10 kids. Some families are, but the beauty is that in our diversity, because the people who are in the pews, who are sitting in the audience, they're various. And we're going to be able to connect with people that are all so different, right? So, I mean, and another testament to the conversation we just had about being fruitful, like that is a beautiful way to deliver that, instead of looking one particular way. I approached my local parish, our parish got a new pastor not too long ago. And so I reached out, because this is something I'm passionate about, and I want to know, like, how can I use my gifts? These are some ideas I have, just connecting with the pastor. And his response was perfect. It was just kind of the same. He's like, and there was another woman who also reached out to him, and we're kind of on a group email. And he said, I want to be able to use the gifts that each of you bring successfully. And he recognized that. And I said, man, if every priest could do that in their parish and utilize the body of Christ, because isn't that how God designed us, huh?
I know, and unfortunately, some of the nitty gritty practical training things we go through are scenarios where like the priest is the one who's like, no, I don't want to do this, right? Like we do talk about that in the training program because not everybody has that sort of welcoming experience. So I don't know if there's any priests listening, but please, if you're ever in a position to be pastor, like that is such a life-giving approach to just take what people offer and say yes and let them go. So
yeah, and I think it's, it's such an important thing because I know like priests today are just swamped.
yes.
And it's like you have people in your parish who want to like help and want to do stuff, like take advantage. And if anybody's listening and they're like, well, how do I get started? Like come up with a plan and approach your priest. Like my shtick is like have him over for dinner. And I know for some that doesn't work in every single situation, but like if you take the time to minister to your priest as a person and not just to ask him for stuff and tell him what he needs to do, but like recognize that he is a human being too, and that he's probably tired. And you're like, hey, come over, grab a beer, we'll make a nice meal, we'll hang out. Like you can reach the guy a little easier. That's my approach. But no, I think that principle of recognizing what you're good at and capitalizing on it. Why is that so hard for us? Like as a church, as like individuals, it's like no, everybody has to do no. You're like you have specific gifts and talents. What are they? Identify them and then do them. And if they're not your gifts, so what? That means somebody else has got it. Like it's not that big. Like we were not made to do everything for everybody, to be all to everyone. Like that's how you kill yourself or just run yourself ragged. So it's like
I think part of that, I mean, there's a lot of different things we could say. Part of it is that we have this like program mentality at parishes, and programs require certifications, right? So if you're not certified in a specific thing and you don't know how to run this particular type of small group, then like you're not going to do the program. And having worked in parishes, that's so hard. So I always tell people, if you're an ambassador, if you're trying to go to your priest with something, like make it very clear. Like the first thing you should say is, listen, I don't expect you to do anything. I want you to just let me do this thing. And he'll probably say, oh, you don't want me to run this thing? You don't want me to do that? And he'll be like, oh yes, okay, that sounds good.
That's smart. Take the pressure off.
Exactly. Like diffuse that situation right at the very beginning, because having worked in parishes and knowing so many priests, they're overworked, and the standard operating procedure in a lot of parishes, people will say, you know what you need to do is you need to reinstate the Thursday night Bible study because we had that for 20 years and I liked that. And the priest should say, great, you're going to lead it? Awesome. I'll put it on the calendar, right? Like that's what the priest really wants to say. So if you go to your priest and you're like, hey, you know what we should do is this NFP program where we have this support group, and he'll say, you're going to lead it? And you say, yes, I will. And he'll say, I'll put it on the calendar.
Christina, I didn't know you did such good impersonations too.
Parish Council Susan, ladies and gentlemen.
Or Karen. But too, just to go along with what you were saying, Christina, and what Emily, you were describing, I love how you always talk about have your priest over for dinner. And you also say, like, you don't have to specifically talk about NFP or fertility awareness. Just have them over for dinner, because you're creating a relationship, a foundation there that then opens the door to have more conversations. He knows he can come to you for this. He knows what maybe just talk about your gifts and what your goals are in life. Like those kind of things come out, but you're establishing that relationship, and that's good. That's fruitful.
It is. Yeah. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up listening to this podcast, because he's awesome. Hi, Father Ed, if you're listening. But yeah, like that was it. Just come over for dinner. It actually happened by accident that he found out that I do all this fertility awareness stuff, and then he was like, "Oh, hey, I need help," and I was like, "You got it, buddy." But then like when he comes over to my house for dinner, he comes over to my house for dinner. We don't talk shop. Like it's not business hours. Like this is something totally separate. And yeah, like that's important. And I've talked to people, they're like, my son in the background, adding his 50 cents. I know that it's not like applicable in every single situation, but yeah, Christina, I think that your idea of just, hey, we need this, and also I can do it. That's such a much different approach than you need to take care of this because the priest is going to be like, yeah, I'll put it on my list. Because these things are needed. So it's, if anybody's listening who's like, well, maybe, if we're putting a bug in your ear, like, I am totally interested in doing this, I'm feeling a little call, like, sit with that for a bit and see what happens, and see where it goes. Like, if it's one of those things that you're supposed to do, like, doors will open, but you've got to like start pushing on them a little bit. But yeah, anyway, I'm getting off on a little tangent, which I knew we were going to do today.
It's a fun tangent though. It's an important
It's
one.
a fun tangent. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So real quick, are you working on anything new now other than what we've been talking about that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, I have two things. One, I'm really, really excited that I was able to receive a capacity grant from OSV, kind of ongoing after the Innovation Challenge. And they wanted to know how they could help me serve more families with my programming. And so I have somebody who is translating my charting guide into Spanish. So I already have cycle prep in Spanish. It's subtitled in Spanish. All of the handouts are in Spanish. And now the kind of the next course, the charting guide, which actually teaches the girls how to observe and keep a chart, is going to be in Spanish. So that should be launching. Timelines are funky these days, but like I'm hoping by the end of February, maybe beginning of March, that's going to be out for everybody. And then the other thing that I'm working on is not quite so concrete with a deadline, but I'm working on a book. I'm writing a book which really embraces kind of what we dove into earlier about this concept of cycles as inherently valuable for how women see themselves as being made in the image of God. And so it's a book that's going to kind of look at some theological concepts, but then it's also going to apply some charting knowledge to how we approach our spiritual life. So that's in the works right now. And I'm really excited. I don't have a publisher yet, so I don't know if you're listening and you're a publishing company and you're like, I want to snatch that up. Please come talk to me.
Christina, I'll have a conversation with you later.
I was going to say, Mary has thoughts.
We'll connect. I have thoughts, but that's so exciting. I was talking to someone else, Bridget from managingyourfertility.com. And I've written a book that I'm in the process of getting published right now. And I love that we're seeing this kind of new market of new books with all of this content. We have Holistic Feminism that just came out, which I feel like is kind of like the first one, unless there's something I'm missing. The book that you're working on, I can't wait to learn more about. So thank you for sharing that with us. I love to see, again, the body of Christ delivering these books in all these different kind of languages. I don't mean like English. Y'all know what I'm trying to say. Oh, also how exciting that you're getting those things translated to Spanish, because that's something Emily and I have identified that we want to do too, and to reach that Spanish community that really wants all this. So excited to promote that when it comes out too. So, okay, last question, actually, sort of last question. Can you give us your elevator pitch for fertility awareness?
No, I don't know.
Shame on us. You see, Emily was talking about how we usually come so prepared, and this was the one question we actually did plan on asking that we didn't show you ahead of time. Yep. So that's on us.
Whoops, our bad.
No, it's fine. Okay, so my elevator pitch as to why people in general should use fertility awareness, or why I do it.
Yeah, fertility awareness in general, whatever your heart desires. Yeah.
I believe that through fertility awareness and learning to read the signs that our body gives us and the language that our body speaks to us, we can learn to better understand who we are as God's children. That's my pitch.
Amen. Short and sweet. I like it.
I do sort of love that we didn't send you that question, because I think you're the only person who's given like a totally honest response of, I can't give the elevator pitch. It doesn't exist. So thank you. Wait, everybody else has had time to prepare, but you just got to be honest. And I love that.
Yeah, it's so funny because in my ambassador training, one of the things that we work on is like, what's your why? Right. So I asked them, like, I say, we need to fill in these 3 sentences. Like, I started using NFP because I continue using NFP because I want to support others because, and I tell them, like, it needs to be 20 seconds. Like, you need to be able to put it in a bulletin blurb. right? But when people first fill out these sentences, it's like 12 minutes of spelling. We need to make this a lot shorter. But it's complicated, right? Because it really is so much more than filling out a chart and deciding when to have sex. Like, it is about the way that I live my life and understand the value of my body and what I do with that knowledge. And that's huge. It's huge. So
Totally. Okay, my for real last question is what is a family karaoke all-star?
me, somebody who does impressions. I'm really good at like classic Michael Jackson, like kid Michael Jackson, like Jackson 5. Yeah,
I like it.
I do that, and I also do Cher.
But this
I'm
isn't a
gonna
surprise
definitely
seeing all
do
your.
demo-
Go ahead,
I'm
Emily.
gonna do a demonstration at some point.
Well, your
Definitely.
reels are awesome. I mean, you're pretty amazing at your reels on Instagram. And so it kind of is that where we're getting a little taste of the karaoke all-star right there?
Someday I'll just have to not dub a reel. Maybe I'll have to like actually sing one, Cher.
Like, folks, this is not a voiceover on this reel. This is actually me. Like that would, yeah, that would go viral.
Karaoke is one of our family's love languages. We all love to do it. My husband's a singer. I'm a singer. Our kids are singers. And so it's just something that we do for fun. And yes, so maybe someday, hey, if you ever come to Boston, we will have a karaoke night, and I give you permission to film it because it'll be great.
Oh, nice. All right, we're going to remember that. Well, Christina.
For me.
Wait, say that again?
You can rap for me.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fair. All right. You sing, I'll rap. I can't sing.
Yeah,
so
we're gonna have like a Cher Jackson 5 Michael Jackson versus like Snoop Dogg. That's what's gonna be going down.
I love it. I love it.
I love it too. Oh man. So Christina, thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge with us today, and just in the real world through all of your programs. We love having this conversation with you.
Thank you, ladies, so much for the work that you're doing. It's so valuable, so needed. I'm honored to be here today.
Great. So y'all make sure to check out our show notes for all the details on where you can find Christina and all of her work, and to stay in touch. And we are so grateful that you joined us today. We can't wait till next time. Y'all take care.